Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast where we unpack what it really takes to rewire your brain after alcohol. Hi, I'm your host, Kate Vitella, a registered nurse, board certified in mental health and addiction, sober since 2018, and a coach who blends neuroscience, lived experience, and real talk to help women break the shame spiral and rebuild their thinking with tools like journaling, humor, and honest conversation. This isn't surface level sobriety. This is where the healing gets deep, grounded, and unapologetically honest. So let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Rewired Sober. This one is a solo episode, and I'm going to start with some honesty here. This one might ruffle some feathers. I'm going to go into the reasons I don't call myself an alcoholic. And again, this is a personal word for those of us on the recovery journey. And so I thought this would be an episode that I would record, maybe even just for me, so it's out there in the ether and I can say I did it. I was on a forum last night with Holly Whitaker and Erica Chidi, I think is how you say her name. She's the author of the Substack, Soft Boundaries. It was a really great group, and we were talking about how to feel safe in these times and social media and all the things. And I remember asking Holly, like, how do I show up on social media when I just want to hide right now? And, how do I create my creative work? How do I keep putting out podcast episodes and doing all these things when it's tough right now? And we got into the conversation about some of our best work just kind of comes when we're laying on the floor throwing a fit in the middle of the night, And I thought about recording this episode, and I wanted it to be perfect because this is such a loaded topic and I wanted to say all the right things. So I've put off recording this for months and months. And I've been thinking about it since I started the podcast. I'm 40-something episodes in. And it was like, no, I gotta structure it perfect. I have to say the perfect things. I have to find the scientific backing. I have to be fair and equal measured. No, I don't. And just that conversation with Holly and Erica really just inspired me to turn the mic on and say what I feel and let it be messy and just let it be honest. Because here's the thing, once I put these episodes out into the world, much like any creative work you put out into the world, you can't control what people think. You can't control their opinions of your opinions. You can't control how they perceive what you said, how they internalized it, all their old baggage and shit. So here we go. But as a coach, as a board certified nurse coach, certified in addiction recovery, I'm out loud in these spaces. I've been on over 15 other people's podcasts. I feel like I should explain this because it is such a loaded topic. And I kind of want to explain it. I want to put it into words. Like I said, for no other reason than maybe just for myself. So I'm going to take you back. When I first started in recovery in 2018, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and every day I went to a meeting, sometimes twice a day, and I said, "My name is Kate and I'm an alcoholic." And guess what? I was. I could not stop drinking. The longest I could go was a few days. My life had imploded. My physical, my mental health had imploded. My marriage, my career. I was physically ill. I was missing teeth. My hair was rotten. My liver was rotten. And I was physiologically addicted to alcohol. If I didn't drink, I would get shaky and sweaty and nauseous. I had to detox. I couldn't stop thinking about alcohol. It was all I wanted to do was drink. And the thought of not drinking about killed me. So yeah, when I sat down in 2018 in those rooms and I said out loud, "I'm a fucking alcoholic," it felt like freedom because it was the first time I had surrendered to what it was. I wasn't going to say, "Oh, no, I have a mental health issue. I have depression. I have OCD. Oh, no, it was my job. Oh, no, it was my husband, my marriage, my career, my lack of sleep. No, the blame was going 100% on the fact that I was addicted to alcohol. And I was so relieved to say that out loud. And as time went on, of course, as traditions go in AA, you say, "Hi, I'm Kate. I'm an alcoholic," every single day, every day, every day. And I went to AA for probably 2 years, 2.5 years, every day straight. And I said, "I'm an alcoholic." And I meant it because in those days, it took everything I had not to drink alcohol, not to think about drinking alcohol, and to repair the damage of drinking alcohol. I was obsessed with not drinking alcohol. And over the course of those 2 years, it started to feel less and less like my identity because around, year 1, I was like, "Wow, I don't really feel like I crave it anymore. And I've got this, I'm doing it. A whole year sober." And then around year 2, I was like, "Well, another year has passed and I'm still never thinking that I should drink again." Right? And as the years passed, it seemed so foreign to me to continue to call myself an alcoholic. It seemed like the oddest thing I've ever heard to call myself an alcoholic addicted to something I don't even do anymore. I'm not even that person anymore. And when I first started coming out in public and saying, "I don't really identify," I mean, I don't want to sit in those rooms and call myself an alcoholic. I don't feel like I'm addicted to alcohol anymore. It felt like I was gonna get burned at the stake. When I left the rooms of AA and decided to pursue other avenues of recovery, I'm telling you guys, it felt like I had left the church. Like, I was pretty sure God was gonna come hearkening down. Is that a word? I don't know. Do you hearken? I was pretty sure God and all the angels would be at my doorstep letting me know I just bought my first one-way ticket to hell. Well, not my first. I mean, let's face it. I was a raging drunk, so I had many tickets. But you know what I mean? Like, there was this time in my life when it was right at the pandemic. It was 2020. I was 2 years sober. The world shut down. I did not even want to go to online AA anymore. In fact, I didn't want to listen to AA literature podcasts. I didn't want to talk about the 12 steps. I was just ready to move on. And when I said that out loud to a couple people in the rooms that I had become friends with, it was like blasphemy. Like, who do you think you are? And then quickly following, "Well, you're going to go drink again then. Then you're going to fail. If you won't accept what you are, you will fail." And so it was scary to say it and risky at the time. It felt risky to say out loud, I don't identify with that term anymore. As time went on, I learned more and I learned more and I learned more, and I came across the path of other thought leaders. And for some reason, for them to say it, it seemed a little bit like I don't know, maybe I believe them a little bit more. It's always safer when someone else says a scary, big, ugly truth. Like we kind of nod and go, "Yeah, it's okay. I get it." But sometimes it's harder to face it ourselves. So I'm getting off track here. So I wanted to go into the reasons that I guess I came up with over the years of why it doesn't resonate with me. And maybe this episode will resonate with you if you're struggling with what to call yourself. So I said that I began to learn more about the disease of alcoholism and addiction and what it actually does to your brain. When I got sober, at about 6 months sober, I took a job in mental health and I became a psych nurse. And I started studying like addiction and psychiatric medicine, mental health. And I realized that, oh, we don't call our clients addicts, alcoholics, schizophrenics. We use person first language in these settings. We say, that is John living with schizophrenia, because John is so many more things than just a human living with a condition, right? John is a brother and a parent and, an artist and a lot of other things, right? And then is battling schizophrenia and taking medications and yada, yada. You get the point. Person first language. Had I said in those settings, well, John's schizophrenic, my boss would have been like, no, we don't say that. That's like slang term. And that's kind of rude. You know, we always used person first language and we always tried to put the human above the condition, you know? And so that started to also kind of shake things loose in my brain like, "Oh, wow, like, I'm calling myself an alcoholic, but I wouldn't call anybody else that because that's a slang term." And then I realized it's not even a medical term. Um, then I started studying the DSM. In psychiatry, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for disorders, and it's actually called alcohol use disorder, and it's staged mild, moderate, or severe, depending on your use and your length of time, consequences, all the things, right? And so your doctor might say, Jenny is living with alcohol use disorder, moderate, or Kate has, severe alcohol use disorder. And then in time, and the DSM says at around 5 years, you're in remission. You are in remission from alcohol use disorder. So I started learning about that. And then I realized, oh, the doctor isn't going to write in a patient's chart, oh, this is an alcoholic, because that's a cultural word. That's a slang term. That's not a clinical term. And, and at that time, their books started coming out and people started speaking up. And Holly Whitaker's book came out, Quit Like a Woman. And for all its criticism, it actually really had a lot of great points about, oh, wait, there's no way to medically diagnose. There's no stage 4 alcoholism, right? There's no specific diagnostic test to test for alcoholism. There's just a questionnaire, and we just kind of guess based on symptoms. And there's no cure, there's no pill, so there's no way to test for it and there's no way to cure it. So then what does that leave it? And all these questions started coming up for me as a career nurse. And so it was a lot more than just, I don't want to call myself that. It was bigger than me. It was about the medical profession, and it was about, psychiatry, and how do I become a psychiatric nurse that functions in this new field and learns all this stuff. And then I was studying to become board certified as a CARN, a certified addiction nurse, and learning, how treatment centers work and all of this. And it felt like so wrong to say I'm an alcoholic when I hadn't drank in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and the years went on. And it wasn't just because I, quote, "wasn't drinking anymore." It's because I wasn't even thinking about alcohol anymore. That ship had sailed. It was something that it was a part of my life. But that part where I was physically and mentally addicted and obsessed with alcohol, that was gone. And I was in the healing phases, and I knew it. I could tell, I could see it, feel it, you know? And so all of these thoughts started coming up for me. And it wasn't just this popularity thing of, oh, well, we don't say alcoholism anymore. We don't say alcoholic. It was a lot of research on my own. Another thing that I started researching was, okay, so if we're an alcoholic or alcoholism is a disease, I guess they call it a disease. What does that mean? And I read Mark Lewis's The Biology of Desire, Dr. Mark Lewis, and he talks about the different theories of addiction. And this is where people get stuck, right? Thinking, well, we call it a disease because, it's a disease. You know, all the theories of how we get to become addicted. Is it nurture? Is it nature? Is it genetic? Is it in the water? Are we predisposed? Is it something that happens over time? And what Dr. Mark Lewis came to know through his research was, and his argument is that addiction is not an incurable disease, but it's a learned pattern that the brain can unlearn. And then I started studying neuroplasticity and realizing that sobriety is so much more than just abstinence from alcohol. It's even more than the craving and the life and all of it. It's a total rewiring. And when I began studying neuroplasticity, the concept, I talk about neurons that fire together, wire together. Well, what if those neurons don't fire together anymore? What if we don't do that anymore? Then habits change, pathways weaken, new ones form. We rewire our brain. And all of it came together. And I really started to feel like, wow, it does not make sense for me to call myself an alcoholic anymore. The other thing I realized is that a lot of people will say addiction is a disease. I have a disease. And I completely get that. My thought on it is I don't call it a disease. The way that I look at it is when you are in active addiction, your brain is diseased. You're off kilter, you're dysregulated, you're hijacked. Your reward systems, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, everything is hijacked. But when you quit and you begin rewiring, then your brain heals. And I also realized through research that we call it a disease because it helps legitimize treatment, insurance coverage, research grants. It helps lessen the stigma. So if people want to call alcoholism a disease, an incurable disease, if that gets research and funding, fucking call it whatever you want. I don't care. I'm happy for the research. Also, if calling it a disease lessens the stigma and the shame, call it that. I don't care. Is it really a true disease like cancer? I don't think so. I would argue that in active addiction, like I said, your brain is in a state of dis-ease. And as you heal and time goes on, you are no longer diseased. So it's not really a permanent deficiency. The other thing people will argue is that they have a dopamine deficiency. They won't even argue it, they'll just say it. I mean, let me just be clear. The amount of things that people throw out that are pseudoscience, that aren't real, I could go on forever, but it makes it very confusing. I was on a podcast with a woman who's 10, 12 years sober, and she said, I have a dopamine deficiency. And everyone nodded their head like, of course that's true. And I was like, well, did you go to the doctor and have your dopamine levels tested? Because that's not really a thing. I mean, okay, so there's dopamine dysregulation. Like when you're drinking and using, your brain's reward system gets hijacked. And, we know alcohol floods your brain with dopamine. And so your brain compensates by downregulating your dopamine receptors. Yes. And that's why you need more alcohol to feel the same buzz. But over time, your brain heals. And neuroplasticity and receptor recovery is well documented. Again, in Mark Lewis's The Biology of Desire, he argues the brain can fully rewire. And there's research showing that the receptor activity actually rebounds. So, are we fully struggling with a permanent dopamine deficiency? No, no, no. There's no evidence to that. I think sometimes people like to believe they're forever broken, but that's not really science. That's a story. You know, what is real and true, and I can prove, is dopamine dysregulation while you are drinking is legit. Your brain recalibrates. And yes, you feel flat at first when you stop, but over time, the system recovers and you're not doomed to a joyless life. Now, I am not a neuroscientist, and I am not here to diagnose or tell you how to live your life or what to, I'm a nurse who studies this stuff, but I can tell you that be very careful with what you internalize in terms of your story and what you believe other people are telling you. You have a dopamine deficiency. Uh, you are an alcoholic and you'll always be an alcoholic. You were born this way. I mean, you got to be really careful when you're throwing or stuff like that around. There is some truth there, yes, but it's very, very nuanced. I mean, do I believe I was born an alcoholic? Well, no. I was not an alcoholic in fifth grade when I had never drank in my life. Did I have a genetic predisposition to liking alcohol, to my receptors lighting up a little bit more than other people's when alcohol was on board? Yes, absolutely I did. Um, and nature versus nurture. Did my upbringing, I went left when I should have went right. I had this friend group. I was raised this way. I had these beliefs. I was exposed to this music, this church, this fashion style, and therefore, if so facto, I became a drinker. And then the drinking took a hold of me, and yes. But was I born this way? I don't think so. And again, these are just my opinions, but here's the other part. What good would it do to tell me that I was born this way, that I'm different, and that I forever have a disease? Now, some people would argue that if you don't claim that you're an alcoholic forever, you're in denial, and that denial's coming for you. And I get that. Now, one thing I am not is in denial. There is no doubt in my mind that I certainly had an addiction to alcohol. I was the slang term alcoholic. I was a hot mess express, and that I can never drink again. There is not a drop of denial there. Absolutely. Like I fell out of the addiction tree and hit every branch. However, I also did my homework, and my homework says we can fully recover, and we do. Now, what you tell yourself, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think our thoughts become our reality. And there is a good reason why people call themselves an alcoholic forever. It does stay on the forefront of their mind as a reminder. I can never drink again. I can never drink again. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. Good on them. In no way am I dissing that practice. If that keeps you on the straight and narrow, awesome. It doesn't for me, and for a lot of people. The other thing is people will say, you can't just say you're healed from alcoholism. You're always going to be in recovery. Yeah, I think there's some merit to that. I am always going to be in recovery. I mean, how long do you do personal development? Forever. You know, how long am I going to be in recovery from eating disorders? Probably forever, because I'll always struggle with food and what I am eating and body image. Maybe always. How long do you have to keep your body physically fit? Forever. I mean, but that's not going to mean I label myself as broken. Now, healing does not mean that I'm going to go back and drink again. For me to say I'm no longer an alcoholic, I am no longer in active addiction, my brain is no longer diseased, that does not mean that I can go get ripping drunk because I'm, quote, healed. I mean, that idea that if I'm healed, I should be able to drink, quote, normally, that's absolutely absurd. That's like saying if my broken leg is healed, I should hit it with a hammer just to prove it. No, 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 no. Healing means you don't have to put yourself back in harm's way. Healing means there is no charge around alcohol for me, that I don't feel anything, that I could be around it and I don't give two shits if other people are drinking. I don't think about it. I don't want it. I have no desire. In the almost 8 years I've been sober, I've turned it down probably 20 times, and I don't care. Healing means I'm the type of person who doesn't need alcohol in her life to be happy and healthy and fulfilled and to have a good time. And healing means that ship has sailed. I'll never I'll never drink again. Healing also means I know my emotional limits and boundaries, and I know the things that will take me down and tear me apart, right? Healing from anything, whether it's abusive relationships, eating disorders, a crappy job, a crappy marriage. We have to know where our emotional limits are, and we have to know what our threshold is, and to have changed and come out another person on the other side. And that I feel like I absolutely have done. Do I have a dopamine deficiency? Well, I mean, I don't freaking know. And here's the other part. I don't fucking care. In Holly Whitaker's book, she said something to me that resonated so much. She said, "We're lost in a vortex of what doesn't matter." And I thought, God, that's so true. We get so caught up in the semantics and the vortex of, well, do you call yourself an alcoholic, or do you say you're in recovery? Do you say you're a non-drinker? Do you say you're alcohol-free? Who fucking cares, people? Who cares? For me, the only thing that matters is that I live a whole and healthy and productive life, and that I can look at myself in the mirror, and that I'm not in denial about what I went through or who I was. That's all it means to me. Do I have a dopamine deficiency? Well, probably not. People who have 10, 20 years of recovery and think they, quote, have a dopamine, you know, that could be depression, hormones, trauma. You know, some symptoms like lack of motivation for life and anhedonia, that can linger for years in post-acute withdrawal if not dealt with properly. So, and there's a lot of recovery communities that really lean on that I'm forever broken trap. I shouldn't say it's a trap. I mean, for them, it really helps. And I'm not knocking that. Some of my best friends are 12-steppers, and I get their side of the argument. You know, I had a friend say, well, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, yes, I understand that. There is no doubt in my mind that I was physically addicted to alcohol. I'm not denying that. But to call myself an alcoholic forever seems absolutely preposterous to me. And my husband, who's 4 years sober, came upon this knowing of his own self. He's like, well, I'm not going to keep calling myself that. I haven't drank in 4 years. I don't want alcohol. I never want it again. I don't crave it. I don't think about it. He and I both go to the bar or the event or the game or the show or the club. We order a mocktail. We don't give a shit. So are we alcoholics? I mean, that word doesn't even apply anymore. It just doesn't even apply. And I don't really care what you call yourself. I don't care what story you tell yourself. As long as it keeps you healthy and happy and whole, you know, if it keeps you a healthy human to call yourself an alcoholic forever, go ahead. There are people I know, one of my best friends is almost 20 years sober, and she stands hard by the fact that she's an alcoholic, that she's different, she was born different, that she has a disease, and that is okay because she's an amazing human and her recovery gets to be her own recovery. You know, the only time I have a problem with it is when there are people in the rooms of 12 step who make comments like, well, you're going to drink again then. Well, you're in denial. Well, then you don't really truly believe or you haven't surrendered. No, no, no. That's not true at all. That has nothing to do with it. The truth of the matter is I've done my homework and I know what I am. And the other truth of the matter is it doesn't fucking matter, right? It's my life. It's my recovery and it's your recovery. You call it whatever you want. You do whatever lights you up, whatever sets you free, because ultimately, this battle is you versus you. And so I felt really called to record this, not to defend my position, but to put words to it more than anything. And I hope you found something in this tangent that resonated with you. Um, do your own homework, you know, walk your own walk here, folks. But that's just my story. And maybe that will change, right? Here's the other thing. I'm allowed to change. We're all allowed to change. I was allowed to call myself a raging fucking alcoholic for 2 years and then one day decide I don't identify with being an alcoholic anymore. Guess what? I'm human and I'm allowed to do that. Every 7 years, every cell in your body dies and you literally become an entirely different person. You have the right to change your fucking mind. And so do I. And I think that is the point. And that we love each other and support each other and that we're unified in staying sober and helping each other along this journey. So that is what I have for this rant. And I may or may not publish this episode because maybe it's unthinkable, but, I had to do it. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to Rewired Sober. You can find me on my Instagram at Rewired Sober, where there are links to catch up with me and all the things I'm working on in my coaching business, or the link tree to my business directly will be in the show notes. I so appreciate you joining me on this journey, and I welcome any feedback or any topics you want to hear about, things that you're struggling with or interested in. I love you all so very much, and I'm just so enjoying doing this with you.